We like to think we're in control, right? Humans, setting the rules for AI, drawing the lines, and then, well, a new report comes out and it's almost like hearing that the AI, the advanced AI that we're building, it might already be, I don't know, looking for loopholes, trying to find ways around what we set up. Kind of makes you think, huh,
Yeah. Yeah, that it really raises some interesting questions
yeah.
about what's kind of baked into these complex systems, even at this, I mean, you could say early stage. We're still pretty early in this whole AI thing, but the report you mentioned, it's not just someone's random idea, right?
Oh, absolutely not. We're talking about a draft report here
Sure.
from the Joint California Policy Working Group on AI frontier models. And we're not interested in surface level stuff. We're going deep into the research, the actual thinking that's going to shape, well, how we govern AI in the future.
And the folks behind this, they're not messing around. I mean, the co-leads, we're talking Jennifer Tour-Chase, Mariana Florentino Cuellar, and Lee Fei. Huge names, tons of expertise, computer science, law, public policy. They've got it covered.
For sure. And they didn't just stay in one lane. They pulled in experts from all over: computer science, law, policy, economics, the whole shebang, a real mix of perspectives. And what's really cool is this isn't some finished product gathering dust. It's a draft open for public feedback until early April 2025. So what we're talking about is very much in motion, which is exciting. Today, our goal, our mission is to give you the core insights. What's the evidence? What's it all mean? Especially this idea of AI and oversight. How do we keep up? Okay, let's dive in. Starting with, well, you hear it everywhere, right? Transparency. Sounds simple, but what's it actually mean when we're talking about something as complex as AI?
So at the core, transparency in AI, it's about being able to see, to understand how these models are built and how they're being used. That understanding, it's crucial. It's how we build trust, how we figure out how to guide AI in the right direction. The tricky part right now is that a lot of the folks making these powerful models, these foundation models, they're not exactly, an open book.
Yeah, it's a little concerning. And the report actually references a study, the 2024 Foundation Model Transparency Index. And some of the big players, the scores they got were, well, frankly, pretty low. Like the average for giving details about their training data was only 34%. For explaining how they're managing risks, only 31%. And for transparency about the real world impact, a measly 15%. So why should we care? I mean, why does this lack of transparency matter to the average person? Let's start at the beginning. Where does the data that these models learn from, where does it even come from?
That's a great question. And it's not a simple answer. You've got this mix, this huge mix of stuff. Information scraped from the internet, licensed data, even data that's been labeled by humans. And when there's no transparency there, a few problems pop up. First, we can't really tell if there's bias in that data, which means the AI might make unfair decisions, discriminate. Then there's the copyright issue. Whose data is it anyway? And then it gets even scarier. There's the potential for, well, data poisoning.
Data poisoning, that doesn't sound good. What exactly is that?
Imagine someone with bad intentions. They slip in bad information, misleading data into the training data for the AI.
Yeah.
So the AI learns the wrong things, basically. It can make the AI mess up, act in weird ways, even create vulnerabilities that can be exploited later on. It's kind of like sabotaging the AI from the inside.
Okay, so that's a little creepy. So even with California trying to get a handle on this with AB 2013, the report suggests we still don't know nearly enough about how this data is being collected and used. Now, switching gears a bit,
Yeah.
these models, they can do amazing things. But what about the downsides, the risks? What are developers doing to prevent those?
That's where transparency about safety practices comes in. It's vital. We need to know what could go wrong with these models and what are developers actually doing to stop those bad things from happening. You mentioned the Transparency Index scores, and yeah, not great. California tried to make safety evaluations mandatory with SB 10047, but it got vetoed. Some companies are making voluntary commitments, but we need more details, more accountability. It can't just be, trust us, it's fine.
It's like, just believe us. We're the experts. But the stakes are so high. The report also dives into security, specifically around something called AI model weights. It's like the core, the brain of the AI. Why is transparency so important here?
You got it. Those weights, they're like the knowledge, the learning of the AI. It takes a ton of work, a ton of computing power to create them, so they're incredibly valuable. Someone could steal them, use them for bad stuff. And we need to know, what are developers doing to protect those weights from hackers, from insiders, from anyone who might want to mess with them. Strong access controls, something called confidential computing, these are important. But again, transparency is lacking. We need to know what's being done and how well it works. Because it's not just about the AI doing something bad, it's about the AI itself being compromised.
Right. Before we even get to the AI doing something in the real world, there's the testing phase. How do we know these models are ready for prime time? How rigorous is that testing, and who's doing it?
That's a huge question. Pre-deployment testing. How do we know it's been done right? We need to know these models are being tested thoroughly for what they're supposed to do, but also for what they shouldn't do before they're released. And who's doing the testing? Is it rigorous? Is it independent? The report talks about an incident with OpenAI's model O3. On a math benchmark, it didn't do so well, which shows even if a model looks great, it might have unexpected weaknesses. So we need clear testing standards, independent evaluation, not just the developers testing their own creations.
It's that outside perspective, that independent stress test that really gives you confidence. Now, once these foundation models are out there, they get used in tons of applications. Do we know how they're being used in the real world? What kind of impact are they having?
Honestly, that's where we know the least. The report calls it downstream impact, and the scores for transparency there are abysmal. But we need to know this stuff. Where are these models being used? How are they affecting jobs, the economy, society as a whole? There's one company, Anthropic. They're doing something interesting with their economic index, which tracks how their model, Claude, is being used.
That's rare, unfortunately.
Without this information, how can we understand the impact of these technologies? It's like trying to understand electricity without knowing what it powers.
Yeah, it's like, here's this powerful thing. Who knows what it's doing? Now, the report talks about openness versus transparency. Can you break that down for us? Does giving people access to the model, to the weights, does that automatically mean a developer is being transparent?
Great point. They're not the same thing. Open weight models, where the weights are public, that doesn't mean we know everything.
Not yet.
What data was used to train it? What safety measures are in place? What's the impact going to be? We don't know that just from the weights. But open weights do allow for more people to examine the model, poke around, maybe find vulnerabilities the developers missed. So it's a tool. It can help with transparency and safety research. It's not transparency itself, though. Even the EU AI Act recognizes this. They have some exemptions for open source models unless they pose a big risk.
So open weights are good, but not a substitute for the developers being upfront about their processes. The report is a big fan of independent third-party evaluations. Why is that so crucial? Why not just trust the developers to do their due diligence?
It's about accountability. When you've got something this complex, this fast-moving, can you rely on the people who created it to be the only ones checking for problems? Probably not. You need outside eyes. Third-party evaluations, they bring a lot to the table. More people, different expertise. They can really scale up the risk assessment. Plus, they bring different perspectives. The people developing the AI, they might not represent the people who are most affected by it, and maybe most importantly, they're independent. No pressure from the company, no financial ties. They can give an honest assessment. It's that independent stress test that we need.
Makes sense. But the report also mentions that these third-party researchers, they don't always have it easy. What kind of pushback do they get?
Sometimes it's subtle, sometimes not so much. There have been cases where AI companies, they've tried to, discourage independent research. Maybe hinting, maybe outright threatening to cut off access for researchers who find problems in their systems, restrictive terms of service, that kind of thing. It's like, find a flaw, get punished.
Yeah.
Back in 2024, there was an open letter. Over 350 AI researchers and experts signed it. They called for a safe harbor to protect independent evaluation, because right now it can feel risky to do that kind of research.
A safe harbor? What would that look like for AI?
You know how in cybersecurity you have ethical hackers? They find vulnerabilities, but they're protected when they report them responsibly. It's like that. A safe harbor for AI researchers means they're legally protected when they find and report problems, as long as they do it responsibly. It encourages more research into AI risks, because researchers don't have to worry about getting in trouble for doing the right thing.
All right, protecting the people, trying to keep us safe. So when these researchers do find something, how should they share it? What does responsible disclosure mean in this? I mean, it's a crazy fast-moving field.
We need rules of the road, guidelines. The report calls them rules of engagement. So things like what kinds of AI systems should be assessed, how much warning should developers get before a vulnerability is made public. And we need better ways to communicate those risks, not just to the people who made the AI, but to everyone involved, the companies using it, the people building applications on top of it. A risk at the foundation level, it can affect the whole system.
Like a domino effect. One weak spot and the whole thing could tumble. Whistleblower protections also come up in the report. Can you explain why those are important, especially in AI?
Think of someone who works at an AI company. They see something wrong, something dangerous, something unethical. They need to be able to speak up, right? Whistleblower protections are laws that prevent companies from retaliating against those employees. In AI, the stakes are so high, people need to be able to raise concerns without losing their jobs, without being silenced. There was an open letter in 2024, a right to warn about advanced artificial intelligence. It's all about protecting people who speak up in good faith.
So it's about creating a safe space for people to do the right thing. What are some of the things we need to think about when we design those protections for AI?
A few things. First, who's covered? Just employees or contractors too. Second, what kinds of disclosures are protected? Right now, it's mostly about illegal stuff. But in AI, there might be risks or safety violations that aren't technically illegal but still need to be reported. And then there's the question of, well, most AI development is happening in private companies. Existing laws might be stronger for public sector employees. So we need to figure out how to make those protections work for the AI world.
This is getting complex. We've talked a lot about why transparency is good, but the report acknowledges that some people have concerns about it. What are they worried about?
Yeah, there are legitimate concerns. Privacy is a big one. If we know more about how the AI works, could that accidentally reveal personal information about people? Security is another. If we give away too much about the AI, could that make it easier for someone to attack it? Then there's intellectual property, trade secrets. Companies worry that transparency could hurt their competitive edge. And finally, there's the fear that too much regulation will stifle innovation, too much red tape, too many hoops to jump through. And then there's transparency washing. Companies pretending to be transparent but not really changing anything.
Valid points. So how does the report address those concerns?
They make an interesting argument. They say that AI development right now, it's not at what economists call the Pareto frontier, meaning we can probably improve transparency without making those other things worse. Like, most of the information we need to know about AI doesn't involve private data. Security risks can be managed with smart disclosure strategies. And a lot of the data we need for transparency, companies are already collecting it anyway, so sharing it shouldn't be a huge burden. As for transparency washing, well, public transparency with clear standards and independent verification, that makes it harder to fake it.
So we can have our cake and eat it too, maybe.
Yep.
Okay, let's talk about what happens after these AV models are released. The report talks about adverse event reporting. What's that all about?
Think of it like, well, in medicine, they track side effects from drugs, right? Or in aviation, they report accidents. Adverse event reporting for AI, it's about having a system to collect information about what happens when AI is used in the real world. Any problems, any unintended consequences, any harm. It's about learning from those experiences.
So a way to track what's working and what's not. What would a good system look like for AI?
A few things. First, what events should be reported? Actual harm, near misses, unexpected outcomes. Then, what information needs to be in those reports? And can we anonymize some of it to protect privacy? Who does the reporting? The report suggests both developers, because they know the system best, and users, because they're the ones experiencing it. And who gets that information? Probably government agencies, maybe industry groups too, so everyone can learn from it.
Makes sense. Are there any examples of this kind of system already in place?
Oh yeah, tons. Like in transportation, you got the NTSB for plane crashes, NHTSA for car safety, and healthcare, there's VA or errors for tracking vaccine side effects. And in cybersecurity, CISA handles reports about cyber attacks and vulnerabilities. There's even a new one for AI, the OECD's AI Incidents Monitor. But it's voluntary and relies on public information.
So we've got models to work with. What are the benefits of doing this for AI?
Well, first, it helps us find problems we didn't anticipate, things that didn't show up in testing. Second, by looking at these real-world incidents, we can learn how to prevent bigger problems down the line, make the AI safer. Third, it improves communication. Government and industry can work together to address risks. And lastly, the report suggests that this kind of system might actually be cheaper than other regulatory approaches.
So lots of potential benefits. What about challenges? I imagine it's not easy to set up a system like this.
Definitely not.
Oh.
One challenge is figuring out what exactly counts as a reportable event. AI is so new, we're still learning about the risks. Another challenge is building up the capacity to handle those reports. Government agencies need the people, the expertise to analyze all that data. And then there's the issue of, well, will people actually report these incidents? How do we encourage that?
Tough questions. Does the report have any recommendations?
They do. They say make sure the reports go to the right people, the agencies with the expertise to understand them. Start with a clear but narrow definition of what needs to be reported. And as we learn more, we can expand it and make it a combo of mandatory reporting for developers and voluntary reporting for users. And instead of creating brand new agencies, maybe we can use existing ones, leverage their knowledge and resources.
Use what we already have. Okay, last big topic from the report, scoping. How do we decide which AI entities or activities need to be regulated? They talk about thresholds. Can you explain that?
Sure. Thresholds, it's like drawing a line in the sand. You pick a measurable thing like how much computing power was used to train the AI, and you set a level, a threshold. If you're above that line, you have to follow certain rules. If you're below, you don't. It's a way to say, okay, who's big enough, who's powerful enough to need extra oversight?
So it's a way to target regulation. But the report mentions some problems with this approach. What are those?
The biggest one is, well, AI risk is not always black and white. It's not like you're safe, you're dangerous. It's more like a gradient. But thresholds, they create these hard categories. And the things we measure, like computing power, they might not always perfectly reflect the risk. And AI is changing so fast, those thresholds might need to be updated all the time. What's high risk today might be low risk tomorrow.
So it's a tool, but a tricky one. The report talks about different kinds of thresholds. Can you give us a rundown of those?
They talk about four main types. First, thresholds based on the developer, like how many employees do they have. Second, thresholds based on cost. How much did it cost to train the AI in terms of computing power or actual money? Third, thresholds based on the model itself. How well does it do on certain tests, specifically tests that are relevant to the risks we're worried about? And finally, thresholds based on impact, like how many users does the AI have? That can give you an idea of how influential it is.
Four very different approaches. How do you choose the right one?
The report says, look at your goal. What are you trying to achieve with this regulation? Are you trying to help small startups? Maybe a threshold based on company size is good, worried about dangerous uses of AI. Then maybe focus on how well the AI performs on certain tests, trying to prevent systemic risks. Look at the impact, how many people are using it. It's all about picking the right tool for the job.
So match the threshold to the problem. Anything else policymakers should keep in mind?
Yeah, a few things. When can you actually measure this thing? Some things you can measure early on, like computing power. Others, like societal impact, you can only measure later. That affects how you enforce the rules. Then, how easy is it to measure this thing accurately? And can anyone check if the measurement is right? Or is it just the company saying, trust us? The report calls that null compliance. You can't have a rule that's impossible to check.
Those are great points. The report mentions that a lot of people are focusing on compute thresholds based on how much computing power was used. What are the pros and cons of that?
Compute thresholds are appealing because we have pretty good ways to measure computing power. And you can do it early on, before the AI is even finished. But the link between computing power and risk, it's not always clear-cut. And we're starting to use different approaches to AI, like using synthetic data, which might not need as much computing power. So it's a starting point, but not a perfect measure of risk.
A good first step, but not the whole story. What's the big takeaway on thresholds?
Don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah.
One single threshold is probably not going to cut it. AI is too diverse, too complex. The EU AI Act, they get this. They use compute as a starting point, but they also consider other factors, and they have a panel of experts to identify new risks. We need to be flexible, use multiple thresholds, and be ready to update them as AI changes. Don't just focus on the developer. Look at the model itself and the impact it's having. And be realistic. Can we actually measure these things? Can we verify them? It's a process, an ongoing process.
It's not about finding the perfect answer today. It's about being ready to adapt. Okay, we've covered a ton of ground here. What are the key takeaways for our listeners?
This report tells us, even at this early stage, AI might be finding ways to work around our rules. Transparency is absolutely crucial. We need to know how AI is being built, how it's being used, what the risks are. Adverse event reporting, that's a powerful tool. We can learn from real-world experiences, good and bad. And thresholds, well, they're a starting point for regulation, but we need to be smart about how we use them. No silver bullet.
Exactly. We've gone deep here, but for our listeners, we hope this gives you a good understanding of what the experts are thinking about, what's shaping the future of AI. It's all about making sure these powerful tools are used for good and preventing the potential harms.
Which leads to a final question. If AI is already trying to outsmart us, what does that mean for how we think about our relationship with these increasingly intelligent systems? What assumptions do we need to rethink? It's a question worth pondering, and this report is a good starting point for that reflection.